Hello and welcome back to the workshop. So quite a while ago, I made a Drawknife. Never made one of those before and it came out rather well actually. That was a present for my dad and I always intended to make one for myself but never got round to it. Drawknife is a very useful thing for making handles, tool handles. But of course you can buy tool handles, so it's never been a matter of urgency to make one of my own. But then I broke the handle on my Pitchfork and a new handle for that was 20 quid. And I was so horrified I didn't even pay that. I bought a cheaper handle, but then that cheaper handle broke. So now, rather than going and spending 20 quid on a decent handle, which of course would be on top of whatever it was I spent on this crappy handle, I proposed to make my own, which of course means making a Drawknife first. My dad's Drawknife I made from one of these, a farrier's rasp, and I was about to do the same again for myself when I remembered I've got a much better starting point. What we have here is a box of broken things that a friend of mine found in a shed on the family farm and very kindly gave to me instead of just weighing them in. Some of you might remember this from last year because it contained this, a English axe in absolutely horrible condition, but I was able to use this as a template to make my own axe. It also contains this, the remains of a Drawknife. It's obviously missing its handles, but at first glance it does look well savable, and I'd like to, if possible, save this because it's hand forged. I can tell that much straight off. It's quite nicely made. It's very old. This is well over 100 years old, I'm sure. So this has been handmade by somebody with a great deal of skill, care and attention. And I think with a bit more of those, we can have it back in working order. I'm going to wire brush this in a moment. First thing I'm going to do though is do a hardness test on the edge. I want to see if it's kept its temper, because if it hasn't, we'll have to go for the whole heat treat process. This is my set of hardness files. These are very simple to use. Each file is made to a very exact hardness, in this case 40 Rockwell, and simply if I can scratch this then it's softer than 40, which would be a disaster for this edge. And we go from 40 all the way to 65, which is super hard. Before I test it though, I'm just going to clean up the edge here so that we don't fill up the files with rust. There's a word in there. That'd be interesting. We'll clean that up in a bit. Let's see what we got then. So I guess anything over 50 would do, but definitely we need over 40, which is this one. That's just skating over, which is excellent. So that bodes well. It means there is some heat treatment still in it. So what's this one here? We're on 45 now. Still nothing, good. 50. Yeah, we're getting a few marks on 50. Move to a fresh bit. You can see that's just biting. Let's try 55. Pretty much the same actually. 60. Yeah, so 60 bites into it. So you can see that at 60 bit into it, all the ones below that skated over it, so we're between 55 and 60. I'm happy with that. That's saved us a lot of effort in heat treatment. Right, back to the wire wheel, and we'll clean this up and see if we can see what the words say. W. Greaves and Sons. I'm not sure of the third word there. And then we've got something steel. That in itself is interesting because going by the Braids catalogue, so Braids were a competitor to Greaves, in the Braids catalogue round about in the very early 1900s they started offering the option of having all steel as opposed to iron with a steel strip welded in the cutting edge, which is how it had always been done prior to that. So that would suggest that this is just one piece of steel, which would have been cutting edge technology, if you pardon the pun. Right, I'm going to go and have a cup of tea and I'll look up Greaves and see if I can tell you a bit more about them. Well, I've had some refreshments. While I was doing that, I had a quick look online and that threatened to take me down a right rabbit hole. I'll keep it brief here. So William Greaves and Sons are far more important company than I thought they were. So what we have here, the full inscription is William Greaves and Sons, and that's Sheaf Works underneath, and that's reference to the River Sheaf, which runs through Sheffield. And so it turns out William Greaves was one of the foundational companies for the establishment of Sheffield as a centre for steelmaking. So in terms of dating the Drawknife, we can say, because it mentions Sheaf Works on there, it has to be after 1823, which is when they built the factory. In 1850 the company was bought out by Turton and Sons, but Turton and Sons carried on using the trademark William Greaves for a period of time, and then in 1860 Turton themselves were bought out, so presumably the trademark died off at that point, but I'm not sure on that. But a guesstimate then, we can say it's the first half of the 1800s, so a lot older than I expected it to be. It also shows that the practice of using steel to make the whole tool, as opposed to just the cutting edge, that came in much earlier than I thought it did, at least in some parts of the country, or the world. And I say the world because Sheffield was obviously a massive export centre for steel, and this was one of the first companies to really get into that. They exported an enormous amount of stuff over to America, for instance, or Brazil or Australia. Having a look online, and yeah, it was global. The other amazing thing about this company is that they made their own steel. Very unusual. And their trademark for that steel was electroboratic steel. And that doesn't seem to actually, from what I can tell, doesn't seem to describe anything at all. It's just marketing propaganda. It's a bit like calling like one of today's rockets a Starship. It doesn't mean anything at all. And if you think about it, when this was made, so if we're talking like mid-1800s, electricity itself was barely in use at the time, if at all. Borax, that's a chemical that was probably in use. I mean, it's still used today as a flux for forge welding, but calling your steel electroboratic steel, I don't think that means anything at all. But the fact that they were making steel itself, that's really something. And like I say, one of the first companies to really get stuck into doing that in the Sheffield area, which of course kicked off into being a massive big deal. So I'd clocked the fact that it was old and handmade, but upon investigation, turns out the actual history behind this thing is really rather interesting. Next up, it's going to be the only bit of forging in the project. And that's to get these tangs back into their correct shape. If I hold that there, you can see that is well wibbly, that one. And this one has got some kind of hook going on. They should be fairly straightforward. The only thing I've got to watch out for is to not let the heat migrate from here, where I'm going to be working on it, to here, which is where it's heat treated. If it does, it'll soften this metal, and obviously we don't want that. Got a bucket of water here just in case. I shouldn't need it, but if I do need it, it's much better to have it on hand than need to run out to the tap. I only need a very small amount of localised heat, so I'm going to keep the flame out in the open for this. And I'm going to work bare-handed so I can make sure it's not going too hot. the more I handle this knife, the more I'm really rather taken with the elegance of the design of it, and it's just really nicely it's proportionally lovely. I'm not sure it really comes across on camera, but things like on the back edge here, there's a very subtle curve to it. There's also a gentle curve that way. But things like the angles of where the handles go, this area here is just very nicely done. The fact that this bit here, that's not the same as this bit here, one of the things it tells me this is handmade rather than stamped by machine. Also the era that it's from, of course. Although it's very lovely to my eye, this would not have been special to the person that made it. They would have made loads of these, hundreds and possibly thousands of them. It's not a bespoke item. It wouldn't be anything special to the people that made it, but it is very well made, and I do like things like that. So that's the tongues sorted out. They're nice and straight now, and I've tweaked them as well so that they're the same angle this way. We can now move on to tidying up the rest of it. So what I want to do here is as little as possible, basically. To my mind, restoration shouldn't be about making something look brand new. It should be about making it look old but cared for. That's the look I'm going to go for. So the edge here, that's easy. Where it's chipped and everything, I'm just going to sand that and then grind in a new bevel. So that bit will look nice and shiny. But for the rest of it, I want to keep this texture that's in here. What I will need to do though is to get rid of the slight mushrooming where someone has rather barbarically hammered the back of this. So you can see there along that top edge. And I think I'm best doing that with a file. Let's see what we can do. Yeah, this is the worst bit here. That's got it. So that's the back edge sorted. It feels much nicer now. We've still got a fair amount of rust in the pits here, and I was contemplating washing it with phosphoric acid, but instead I'm going to wire brush it again, but with a more aggressive wire brush than we did last time. Something mounted in the angle grinder. Dinky one there. One there. That's the most aggressive one, we'll use that. This will also have the effect of burnishing the metal as well. It'll, yeah, well, you'll see in a moment. Looking good. That's just what I was after. So we got rid of nearly all the rust, burnished it, but kept the texture, kept the age in there. Next up, I want to make the handles. For the handles, I'm very keen to make something that's nicely in keeping with the originals. And the thing is about Greaves being such a prolific toolmaker, there are loads of examples still in existence. But then it occurred to me as I was trawling the internet looking for pictures of draw knives, we're talking about something that's potentially 200 years old. A lot of those tools will have not their original handles. But then I found a website that's it's a museum of coopering tools, and on there they've actually got some new old stock Greaves draw knives. So, well, let's adjourn to Woodworking Corner and I'll show you what I found. This is a website called the Cooper's Tool Museum. Coopers make barrels, wooden barrels, and that would have been a huge trade back in the past. And they used draw knives, all kinds of wacky shapes of draw knives. So on this site they've got, here we go. So this is a Cooper's draw knife is generally much more curved than the example that we've got. So you can see here very simple handle types. What's interesting here is this was bought in a crate full of unused old stock draw knives. So this is going to be as it left the factory. So again, we've got a very simple design. And again here. But then this one, quite a bit more detail going on. What strikes me about this one though is that these handles don't match. This one here is slimmer than this one. But I like the look of this one, so that's what I'm going for. I'm going to make something similar to that. So I took this handle here as my starting point, and then what I've done is sketch up a simple drawing of the life-size version. And I took this version and I traced it so that we can glue this one onto a bit of card and use it as a template for the wood turning. I need a template because I'm trying to make two things exactly the same. There we go. So we've got a design, we've got a template, now we need some wood. Under the bench here I've got loads of interesting bits of wood, but if you've seen the last project I did that involved a bit of woodworking, when I made that Hori, you'll know that we went through this lot and every bit, when you got into the heart of it, had some kind of defect. And I ended up going with a very old piece of oak. This piece of oak. So today we'll just jump straight to using the oak. And oak is an appropriate choice for a small tool handle. I think the original would have been oak or beech, but like I say, oak will do us just fine. But we'll cut it down roughly to length with a chop saw, rip it down with a bandsaw, and have a good look inside. That looks good. Now it's round, we can mark it out. So that's bit there, it's going to be where the ferrule goes. That's a high point, that's a low, that's a high point, and that's the end. I'll speed that up a bit, I'm a bit slow there. I'm going to go one speed quicker, so now I'm a bit slow. It's only a small piece. good, is it? What's going on there? This thing here is a micro switch that normally lives in there, and it just means you can't turn the lathe on with the lid open. It's possible this is shorting to the body of the lathe, but then again I don't think so. So it sounds like it's shorting out somewhere. Other than that, I've got no idea what's just gone wrong. This is unplugged, by the way. That's that micro switch there. This is an electromagnet in here, and this is the contactor switch. So when the electromagnet's active, it pulls that on and provides power to the motor in there. But it's not latching for some reason. It's either not latching because there's something gone wrong, or it's shorting out. So what I'm going to do now is put a jumper wire across where that switch goes, take it out of the circuit, see what happens then. Okay, there we go, so there's the jumper. That's the original. Right, let's try that out. So all I've done is bypass that micro switch that's under this cover, just to see if that's the problem. So power on. No. wasn't going to be that simple, was it? Okay, power off again. Just going to have a closer look at this. I do have another contactor, but I don't know how to wire it up. It's not for this lathe, it's for a different lathe. What a wind up. So I've just used the air gun to clean that down, and I've tightened up all the connections on it. Really not hopefully it's made any difference. Let's see. Right, this time I've disconnected the motor. That's these two wires. So we've still bridged the micro switch there. Let's see what happens. It's not freaking out. All the lights in the room aren't flickering, so that tells us the issue then is with the motor. At least that's something. So I'm going to have a look in here, see if there's any loose connections. Ah yes, that's what's happened. The capacitor wire has touched the terminal on there. That's what it was. This is the problem. This wire here, see the glint of silver, that's the insulation that's burnt away. That was touching this terminal. That's the issue. So it was a short after all that. So in there is a capacitor. Which hopefully is still okay. So it's the capacitor there that kicks the motor into life. That's its only job, I think. Yeah, with this type of motor, I think so. And I think crimson ring terminals on that. we fixed the thing that was broken, but the question is, did the capacitor survive? What was going on there? So now if I reconnect the motor to the contactor here, it should all work again. He said optimistically. Will it run? It should now, unless that capacitor's damaged. So the belt's off the motor, so let's see what happens. Plug it in. Here we go. No fuss at all there, was there? Fixed it. Phew. Right, let's unplug that. Now it shouldn't start. Oop. Now it should. Right then, after that not so brief interruption, let's get back on with it. That was a nasty catch, wasn't it? Oh, look at that. That's blown it. Just one catch and it's gone. Well, that's a bummer. It just goes to show you need to practice these things. So I could carry on, I could get something that would be aesthetically acceptable, but it wouldn't be this profile, which is the profile I'm after, so it would, yes, it wouldn't be right. Let's try again. I don't normally have to hammer it onto this end, but because it's oak, it seems the best way forward. That might be it. So I'm much happier with the second attempt. It fits the profile really nicely this time. Of course, the challenge now is to do that again. So I've cut another lump of oak. I'm going to rip it down in the bandsaw and we'll have a go. Whew, that took some doing. I just never do enough wood turning to get good at it, really. But there we go, 1 practice piece and 2 reasonable. Good, I'm pleased with that. Change the belts and we'll get it up to full speed for the sanding. There. I'm going to start with 80 grit, which is this one. I'm going to go up to 120, 240 and finish at 320. Good. Drop the speed back down again, and we'll put those grooves in. So we're after that, these lines, and I'm going to cut them in with this, the small skew chisel. Cool. So the bulk of the work is done now on handles. I think they've come out quite well. I need to tidy up the end, obviously. That's as far as I can go on that one. This one I think I'm going to remount it and see if I can get a little bit more off, and then I think I'll just cut that off with a knife and then over to the belt sander to tidy up the rear end. Crikey, wood's hard. Right, cut some ferrules next. So I've got my bit of scrap copper pipe and a pipe cutter. The point of the pipe cutter is it's a nice square cut. I'm a bit unsure as to how the handles would have originally been fixed on here. So we've got a tapering square tang, of course. Now mostly on old tools, and well, even fairly modern ones, like this turning tool, they drill a hole in the handle and then just hammer in the tang, and that's why there's a ferrule here to stop the wood splitting, and it's just gripped in place by a friction fit. And that's fine for something like this, which has almost no stress on the handle. But if you think about how the draw knife's going to be used, you're literally pulling on the handle all the time. I have seen photos of some of the Greaves draw knives which have caps on the end of the handles. But for that, it would have to be a slightly different design. You need a longer tang for a start, and it would have to be threaded so that you could screw a cap on, or you'd have to rivet that cap on, hammer it over at the end. So with this one, it couldn't have been like that. It's a hidden tang design just by the nature of how short these tangs are. I think the most practical thing for me to do is what I did on the Drawknife that I made, and that's to, I'm going to make a pilot hole in here, burn it in and then glue it. It. I think they're on correctly. It's a bit hard to tell. I could go a little bit more. I'm inclined to leave it there. I will have a quick check on the photo. Well, I'm glad I checked. Look at this. As you can see on this one, the handles completely obscure the tang. I mean, the photo's taken at an angle, so it's a bit hard to tell for definite how far they go in. But it's certainly a lot further than this. So even if I line it, yeah, we've got to go, I'd say, another ½ inch. It's not that I'm trying to do a perfect copy of what's in the photo, but that would have been quite different if I'd left it like that. I think we got it. Dry that one off. Yeah, that's nice and straight. That's just right now. That is better, isn't it? Splendid. Right, let's glue them in. You can see there on the tang, a couple of seconds with the grinder was just to roughen it up a bit, give the glue something to grip to. I'm going to use Ironthumper Rapid, which is not authentic. Back in the day they would have used rabbit glue, I suspect. But epoxy is better, so that's what we'll be doing. Cool. Been an hour or so and that epoxy is well and truly cured. And it's all looking rather nice now. Time to give it a sharpen. This is quite a nasty chipped edge here, and the only way to deal with that is head on. So I'll just put it in there, take that off, and I'll make this straight while I'm at it. And then we'll regrind in the bevel. Still dinks in it there. see how much I had to take off. it's very blunt now. But there's no way around that, you just have to get rid of the chipped areas. Now we can start putting the bevel back in. Now the interesting thing about this is that it's curved. Only very slightly, but it is curved, which means I can't really... What I did last time was to put something down here to use as a guide and just plonk it on that and set it back to get the right angle. But this, I'm going to have to do it freehand. It's the only way I can think of. And even then, the belt sander's a bit wide really for this, but it's what I've got, so it's what I'm going to use. So I'm going to shape it with this. This is 120 grit, and this will be where all the hard work goes in. And then, once I've got an edge at 120, then we'll move up the grades. That's finally come to an edge now. I can feel a burr on the flat side. It took a while. You might notice there the only way I could get that a consistent bevel, bearing in mind that this has got a slight subtle curve to it, was to sort of do that. That motion worked quite well in the end. So I'm going to do that again as we work up the grits. Finally a 600 grit belt. My usual way to finish off sharpening anything with a double bevel like this knife is to use these ceramic rods, and with these I've even got an axe up to shaving sharp. But of course this is single bevel or chisel grind. So in that situation what I normally do is use one of these. This is a diamond stone, which is 1000 grit, so for anything like a planer blade or a scissors I can use that. But of course they're flat. This is a chisel grind, but it's also curved. So I'm a bit flummoxed with that. Possibly though it's sharp enough. So it's a... oh yeah. Yeah. That's sharp enough to do some work. Great. Well, like I mentioned right back at the beginning, I need a handle for the pitchfork. So let's go and select some timber. A few years ago now I made a video about coppicing, and in that video I cut down a load of ash trees right down to the ground. Well, here they are. This whole bank was completely cleared, and as you can see it's all sprouted back up again. Some of the trees we took out earlier in the year when I used a bulldozer to make this cutting for the compost heap, but I think one of the remaining ones will be an excellent candidate for the pitchfork handle. Nice piece of ash. And bear in mind I still haven't killed a tree. I've just taken one shoot from that stall of about 10 or so. Right, let's get up to the workshop, see what we can do with it. Now if you've seen my previous draw knife video, you'll have seen the first time I've used a draw knife. This will be the second time. So, still not claiming any expertise whatsoever. Very nice. So that's where we are at the moment. This is the straightest part. See it like that, it's completely wonky. So I'm going to try and make it all straight with this as the top side. That's my plan. One of the great things about a draw knife is the ability to go from taking tiny little shavings off to taking whacking great chunks off. I've got a spoke shave here, which is the only tool I've got that's anywhere near similar to a draw knife, and this takes a lot less skill to use, but it can only do a little shaving at a time. So we won't use that yet. See, I'm going to run out of room. So if I'd started with a chunkier bit of wood, I could end up with a more consistent finish, but it would mean a lot more removal of material. The more you put in contact with the wood, so the more the blade is in contact here, the more it acts like a jack plane rather than a smoothing plane. Or in other words, the flatter I can get a surface. Not bad. Discovered this with the last draw knife, that it works quite nicely as a scraper. So pair of 3-inch nails I think will do for fixing. I'm going to knock them through and then clench them. I've left it rather rough. There's no point sanding this at the moment because it's green, very green. But give this a few months, it'll shrink down a bit. I might even have to tighten up these nails here. And then at that point, if I feel like it, I might sand it and probably give it some oil as well. I'm quite happy with that. There it is. Right, so after all that work, is it still sharp? Yeah. Right, let's finish off. All I'm going to do to finish is use some linseed oil. Boiled linseed oil. On the handles, the linseed oil is great because it soaks in and polymerizes, actually sets inside the structure of the wood and protects it. On the metalwork, the oil will help promote black oxide rather than red oxide rust, and it will leave all that texture in there. And over time, the black oxide developing actually highlights the texture that's in the metal even more. Beeswax is another great finish for metal. I use that quite often, but it wouldn't have the same effect to the handles as linseed oil. I should wipe the excess off the metalwork right away so it doesn't go sticky, but I'm going to leave the handles for a bit and then come back to them. Clean the edge out. You can really see the history in the metal now. And this is what I mean about restoration. Well, this is how I like to do restoration. I've left all the age in the metal, as it were. It would have been so easy to have just sanded that out and lost all that patina. When I'm done, I will of course leave the rag outside so it doesn't spontaneously combust and burn my workshop down. On the last Drawknife, the one I made for my dad, I forgot to stamp my maker's mark into it, the M. I haven't forgotten this time, but I'm not going to do it either because I didn't make this, I just fixed it. And it does feel very gratifying to have brought back to life something that was just a bit of scrap that so easily could have just been thrown away. And it's not the only antique tool we saved. Pitchfork can now be put back into service, and I've saved myself 20 quid on the new handle. More importantly, of course, I've now got the ability to make as many tool handles as I need, and I do have a bit of a backlog. So I'll get stuck into that, and I'll see you next time. Cheers for now.